here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is patterns. I think probably most of us have patterns or themes that recur through our lives. And what we're going to do is talk about those today and how they can be a pathway to our greatest life lessons. So before we get started, let's take a couple minutes to get settled in and present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flowing into your lungs and flooding your bloodstream and nourishing all your organs and your cells and bringing vitality and life. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any stress. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it, and this time imagine clean, crisp oxygen. We did that. So imagine oxygen and light flowing into every electron and every molecule of your body and vibrating and energizing and electrifying. And as you exhale, exhale any stress and any remaining tension. And now let's just gently press our palms together and really softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel how delicious that is. And enjoy being physical, the sensations, and bring yourselves present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're going to talk about patterns and themes, actually. I don't know about you, but in this path of transformation, I've seen the same issues come back around and around and around periodically. I remember actually I've gotten past some of the issues that were massive themes in my life, but for a number of years there were a bunch of different themes. One was a theme of power and issues around power and the abuse of power. Hello, Hope. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon to you. So glad you're here. We're talking about patterns and themes in our lives and how they can be the source of some of our greatest life lessons. So I was saying that the abuse of power, misuse of power was a really big theme for me in my life for years and years and years. And for me, it tied back to a past life, potentially. I mean, I don't know where you guys stand on past lives. I don't know that I believe past lives are past. I kind of think that there are many different dimensions of consciousness that coexist all at the same time. So, but I'm using that jargon because it's familiar to a lot of people. But anyway, the power thing for me had connected to being in Atlantis, being one of the people that was responsible for the destruction of Atlantis, and abuse of power, and incredible shame and guilt, and all kinds of other dynamics about that in my life for a lot of years. And as a result of that, I kept myself from being visible. I kept myself from owning my own power. And it's been a very interesting experience to move through that and to come into a sense of greater self-trust, to be able to trust myself to own my power and to own it responsibly. So that was a theme in my life. Another theme was betrayal. In fact, I had done past life regression at one point on betrayal, and there were several different scenarios where there were these deep betrayals in my life, and it was interesting because I saw them carried over into my current life, and well, the past in my current life. I can say I haven't really experienced that in the same way as I have evolved and grown, and used those patterns as an opportunity to grow and transform and evolve. I wonder if you see any kinds of patterns in like this in your own life. There were also patterns of, um, I guess, self-worth issues showing up again and again and again. Is like, oh my gosh, am I ever gonna get past this? And it's interesting because for the most part, I'm past that. And every now and then there's an echo of it that shows up to remind me that, that I've come a long way. And also that, there's this remnant that I get to choose how to interact with. So in this path of transformation, I heard of something called spiral dynamics, and I've spoken to you about this or mentioned it to you before. And I confess that I really haven't delved too deeply into it. So I can't say that I'm speaking accurately about what spiral dynamics actually is. However, what I realize is that as we have these themes, we're kind of ideally going through our evolutionary process and going around and around. Good morning, Dido. And what happens is that we come back around to, maybe if we imagine these different patterns and themes of our lives as constellations, we can imagine that this evolutionary path is going through this orbit, but in a spiral way, in an upward trajectory, so that as we revisit these themes and patterns that occur for us in our lives, we're revisiting them from a different frequency, from hopefully a higher frequency, and therefore the perspective on the pattern is evolving and shifting and transforming into something that is creating greater and greater freedom for us from that pattern. I'm trying to think of some other patterns that showed up for me. Well, the betrayal one was really interesting, actually, because I had that, with trusted friends, um, early on in my life. Actually, through a lot of my life, but in the past life scenario, this was so funny. One of the visions was, everything was blue, and I I was some kind of Bigfoot type creature, covered with white fur, walking upright, and came into the village of these other creatures that didn't look quite the same as me, but they were some kind of related creature. And apparently I fell in love with the daughter in that family, and I was going to take her away with me, and the family killed me and ate me instead. And this is like really a bizarro scenario. First of all, I had never realized like that ice was blue, even though we see the icebergs and stuff that are blue. But I guess I hadn't really seen much of that prior to that vision. And so everything around was blue. And in retrospect, I recognized that it was sometime during the Ice Age or something like that. Anyway, a very interesting sort of interaction. And so there was this theme that went not only in my current lifetime, but went through other lifetimes as well. There was another memory or vision of a previous life where it was in the wild, wild west, and I was some kind of cowboy or something, and in a bar, and ended up thrown out through the saloon window. And then I was going to have a pistol duel with someone over this woman that I was in love with. And we were back to back in the duel. And she was standing where I was supposed to be walking. She was standing in front of me, and we started walking. And before we were meant to turn around and shoot, the other person shot me in the back, and I saw this woman that I was in love with um, look into my eyes as I was shot, and I recognized that she and he had arranged that, and then I died. And so I don't know if these memories. Wow, I had a checkered life. Yes, it's so funny that you say that, Hope, because in this life, I like to say I've had a checkered past because I've done so many different things. But it was so bizarre to have these visions, and I don't know if they were actually past lives, parallel lives, or if they were just really brilliant metaphors that my other than conscious mind brought forward. But it was pretty interesting. And I've been thinking about these patterns that we are subject to. And I have been trained in NLP and hypnosis, and a lot of that is about creating new patterns, new neurological patterns, new patterns of thinking. And I am playing with the idea of recognizing these patterns as structures, as almost like a crystalline structure. Like if we imagine this pattern as having dimensionality and having presence as an entity, as a thing, that perhaps we could interact with it by dissolving that structure, or by allowing that structure to reconfigure itself in a meditation. To imagine, here we give this thing its characteristics and then allow them to morph and mutate into something that ends up being more supportive of us. So on the other side of betrayal, maybe there's loyalty and devotion, for instance, and maybe that pattern could reconfigure itself into a structure that is more life affirming. So for this betrayal, maybe love, connection, authenticity, discernment, all of those different pieces might be a powerful part of a new pattern that could evolve out of that circumstance around betrayal. Because I think a lot of what can happen with the dynamics of betrayal is there's a level of denial about seeing what's there, and reading the signals that are right in front of us. So I'm thinking about all these different patterns. I'm wondering if you have awareness of patterns that have recurred for you. So maybe something around lost love or money. There were patterns around money too, where a lot of us don't give ourselves the freedom to have money. We have a lot of ideas about money, and we maybe have patterns where we get money and then we lose it all, or we get on top of all of our finances, and then all of a sudden some kind of big expense comes in that puts us back underwater. Or maybe with jobs or relationships, maybe you see some patterns in those arenas. I'm just wondering what kinds of patterns you see as these things that recur. I think that lots of people experience the pattern of being not good enough. And then there are periods where you start getting more self-esteem and something happens and it reignites that underlying insecurity. And again, we get to see these things in spiral. I was working with a client yesterday, and it was really, really interesting to notice that this person was really, by all evidence, on the verge of a massive breakthrough in business and success, and really looking at a horizon that, when crossed, would be the next dimension of achievement, accomplishment, and success in their business and their dreams toward really making their dreams a reality. And this person had told me at one point that they had a pattern where they would be really doing very, very well, being successful, just getting things going. And just as that success would come, they would just burn it down. And it wasn't conscious, I'm going to burn it down. It was unconscious, but that's what happened. It's just disassembling the whole structure of success. And it was interesting because in this moment, what was going on was being on the precipice of this breakthrough and this wonderful success. And what was showing up was a deep feeling of what's the point and lack of motivation. And it was interesting because it was in response to the fear around the success. And as we were thinking about it, it again, past life stuff, and I don't know if it's really past life or not, whatever it is, it could be a collective thought, a collective experience, an access point to some kind of more ethereal kind of programming or something. But what came up was that there had been some huge abuses in another time, and that this burning it down whenever things started to be going well was about restricting that power, restricting the capacity to do harm, because there was still this notion that that's what was going to happen, is that there would be that coming into that success would be something that would be creating harm. And so by burning it down, it was preventing that scenario, right? That carried all kinds of guilt and shame and whatever to it. And so it was really interesting because we were able to, by identifying that, whatever that dynamic is in reality, I don't know, but whatever that dynamic is, of this other dimensional influence, by addressing that and clearing that, there was a shift. There was a dramatic shift in being. So like when we look at these patterns, it's interesting to imagine that maybe the patterns go beyond our own personal experience, and we may be picking up some greater meme, if you want to think of it that way, possibly from the ethers, or from past lives if they exist, or from other dimensions if they exist. But by working with these different inputs, we can free ourselves of some of these dynamics. And just to go back to the original idea, every month in my coaching program, we have a an intensive day, you know, like where we gather as a group and we spend a couple hours together and we do some kind of lesson or exercise or process or whatever. And so Dido, you're getting a preview here of what's to come today, but I'm really looking forward to working with this whole idea of these patterns as structures. Like I'm kind of imagining them as the crystalline structures that show up in water with the meditations from Emoto's uh, work, where people meditating on love, for instance, it would create a different crystalline form in the water. And I'm excited to play with the by objectifying these experiences or patterns, by creating them as objects or allowing them to emerge in our imagination as objects that then can morph and change. It'll be really interesting to see what kind of change we can manifest in our experience. Yeah, so Dido says, "Oh, this is so fascinating." Yeah, I'm excited about the idea. It's sort of an outgrowth of the idea around breaking ties with past trauma and envisioning the trauma as all these tentacles sort of that are attaching us, and then by clearing those tentacles, then releasing the trauma, the experience of the trauma. And this idea of crystalline structures, it's just exciting to me. Hello, Maria. Welcome. Glad to have you here. We're talking about patterns that recur through our lives and how they can be offering us doorways to our life lessons. So, you know, if you have this theme, this recurring theme in your life, maybe it's of unworthiness. So there is a life lesson there of finding your own worthiness, finding your own integrity, meaning integration with yourself. So I mentioned that one of the patterns for me was betrayal. And what I realized over the years is that my relationship with a lot of people was really codependent and dependent, and that I was seeking validation from others, from other people, and when I also wasn't very discerning in a lot of ways and overrode my inner knowing about people, and was in denial about seeing what was there in certain relationships. And so the lesson for me out of all of that is to become, and I have, thankfully, to become more integrated, to become more whole, to become more independent and self-reliant, and then to be able to have friendships and relationships where I come to them whole, rather than with a hole that I'm trying to fill through that friendship and that relationship. And so that has been a life lesson for me, really powerful. And so Hope says, mine had always been around finance and getting too much. I've worked on it over the past year and I'm getting there. Getting too much, like feeling like you were receiving too much, like maybe that you weren't worthy of receiving all of the bounty that you were receiving. Is that what you mean, Hope? Because the idea of getting too much, it's interesting. Too much for what, right? And too much says who. And it's interesting because if you are feeling bountiful, maybe that's the maybe that's part of the message for you, Hope, is to allow yourself to feel bountiful and to feel worthy. And then you can enjoy that bounty and share it as you feel fit, as you see fit. So anyway, I noticed that there's way more than one pattern that I've experienced in my life. And I think that by unearthing them, we can learn the lessons that they're there to help teach us. I think it's funny because sometimes the most obvious things are the things that we most readily overlook because they are so obvious, because they're ever present. And so things that are ever present are things often that we just don't see anymore, right? Because they're a constant in our environment. Like we don't really think about the air so much, we just breathe it, right? And so if we wake up to see these patterns, it can be really powerful to give us some personal insight and give us a little bit of reference point to look for where we want to grow and evolve. And so on that note, I'm going to encourage you to look for the patterns in your life. And Maria says, a light, I'm thinking we are the light. We're a light in the darkness. A candle is a candle. We are the light and the darkness. Oh, okay. So we are both. I'm thinking that might be what you're saying, Maria, is that we are both light and dark. And the thing is that light doesn't exist without dark, and dark doesn't exist without light. And as we allow all of these pieces of ourselves to come together, we become whole, and we have more to be able to give and receive in the world. So Maria says, yes, that's awesome. Yes. Light and dark are value judgments. So we get to embrace it all. And it's in embracing it all that it transforms, that light has its dark and dark has its light. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you, thank you, thank you for playing with me today. And I so enjoy your company in these conversations. And if you're enjoying it, please share it out with folks. And we can build our community and conversation together, which would be awesome. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is The Core Connection, and I'm here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. Please check out Enlightened World Network, and I hope to see you here again real soon. Make it a pattern.